And then the smut started. So what did I like about this book? Do I have to change the name of my YouTube channel? Like, obviously, we know that's not true. This was not a good book. It is obviously enemies to lovers, because what else would it be? Hello everyone. It is already time for an August wrap up. I'm filming this before August ends, but hopefully I don't read anymore. My eyes hurt, so I'm gonna try and honestly take a break. But I have read, God, this month feels so long. The books that I read in the beginning of this month, I genuinely don't remember reading them, so this will be fun. But before we get started, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this video, which is Native. If you guys follow my main channel, Cari Cakes, you guys have probably heard about them. Native is a deodorant company that makes aluminum, paraben-free, cruelty-free, and vegan deodorants. They also have really wonderful plastic-free packaging. It's made out of paperboard. They have really incredible scents. I've been using them for years. I usually go with cucumber mint, and now lilac and white tea is a new fave. They also have like seasonal special edition scents, so they just released an autumn package that includes things like warm cider and cinnamon, which sounds just incredible. If you would like to try out Native, usually 3 of their plastic-free deodorants would be $39, but if you use my code CARICANREAD, you will get 33% off, so it would be $26. And then they also now have body washes and toothpastes, so you can get 20% off of those using my code CARICANREAD. So yeah, thank you as always to Native. Like I said, been using them for years. Yay, go smell nice this summer. Okay, the first 2 books that I read in August I actually made an entire video about, and it is the Strange the Dreamer duology. Yes, I finally read it. I feel like since I've started this channel, people have been coming at me to read this book. I love that author's trilogy, Daughter of Smoke and Bone, and I don't know why I felt like people had hyped up Strange the Dreamer so much that I wanted to read it when I was like ready, you know, and the time never came. And so I was just like, screw it. And I read it one day, and if you want to know more, I have a vlog, but it is a fantasy that ties into kind of mythology and gods, and it's very dark, so I do want to give that warning. I didn't know going into it that a lot of it, kind of like Greek mythology does, a lot of it tends to tie into sexual assault, rape, etc., like really dark themes. It's not talked about graphically, I don't remember, but it's definitely like an integral part of the plot. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really love the author's writing, so thank you for finally pushing me to read it. That will be in another video. The next one I read, did I buy this? I have no idea how this came into my possession, but I finally read Deal with the Elf King because I'm just so damn sick of seeing it on my Bookstagram feed and not knowing what it's about. I mean, you could tell what it was about. So this is a fantasy standalone. It is obviously enemies to lovers, because what else would it be? It's frustrating when you go into something and you know that it's enemies to lovers, but you like immediately know everything that's gonna happen. Like the second the Elf King is mentioned, you know that he's not really a horrible evil guy, right? Like it's very rare in like enemies to lovers. It's really more of like misunderstanding trope. People have like these wrong assumptions about each other, right? So it's one of those where it was kind of just frustrating to watch them hate each other, because it was like, but you guys like just aren't communicating. Like it was, so anyway, it's basically, there is the fairy elf fantasy realm, and then there is the human realm, and there's just some kind of deal that goes on where every couple of 100 years or so they have to find a human bride for the Elf King, and it's, you learn why, but it's, you know, just elfy shit. If you are looking for a way to pass the time, like if you have a couple hours, like you have a doctor's appointment and you know you're going to be sitting in the waiting room for a long time or something. Ooh, the Elf King did not like me talking crap. My camera just freaked out, so I lost the footage of talking of the next 2 books. So I'm going to do this a little bit more quickly. Basically, Deal with the Elf King. If you need something to scratch the itch of the tropes that I mentioned, it does the job, but overall it was just like something that I've already seen before. The next book that I read was Funny You Should Ask, and this is another one that I don't know where I saw it. This is the thing where like, because I'm new to the genre of romance, I tend to kind of if someone I vaguely trust posts about it, I will read it. And I think I just kind of saw somebody posted it on Bookstagram. Whatever. This was not a good book. It is a romance, and it is about a journalist who got the opportunity to interview this like hot up and coming movie star that she was totally in love with. And that interview that lasted, it was like a very big piece. So she interviewed him over the course of a weekend. That interview changed his life. It really helped him get more respect in the industry. People fell in love with him even more. It kind of launched both of their careers because it was such a well-written article. Something happened in those 3 days that like we learn about very slowly, because this book is told in flashbacks and then present day. And in present day, this is like many years later. This is like 5-10 years later. Our journalist gets a call and is asked if she will interview the movie star again, kind of as like an anniversary special of their first article together. And this is after this guy has pretty much lost his career due to substance abuse. He's been in and out of rehab. He's gotten divorced. He's just in a bad place. And she agrees to do it mainly because there's some kind of unfinished business from the past. And it's a romance, so you know, it was like there was chemistry that they like haven't stopped thinking about for these 10 years. So unbelievable. These characters were so unremarkable. She was drunk for like half of the weekend. Like, there was no reason why they fell for each other so hard that like 10 years later they're still like constantly thinking about each other. He like wants to whisk her off to go meet his family. Like, it just didn't make any sense. Like I said, the characters weren't really that lovable. Like, they didn't even seem to treat each other nicely. I didn't understand the book. The only thing I really liked is I enjoy it when books will kind of switch format, and so like every chapter we would also get some kind of clip from a magazine or something, so you could like read an article. I do enjoy that, but other than that, man, what the hell? It wasn't funny. So hard pass. And then after that I read kind of meh, and then I read bad, and so I was kind of grappling for anything that sounded interesting. And again, I don't know where I heard about this book, but I read Cinder and Glass. I guess it was sold to me because it was a mixture of the selection, if it took place in Versailles, but also it's a Cinderella story. And I was kind of like, you know, okay. And again, not good. It was one of those things where you knew what was going to happen because it's a retelling of Cinderella. So like the mystery part, we know, because we know Cinderella. We know that the stepmother's evil. Spoiler, if you didn't know Cinderella. But like, and then the romance, from what I remember, because I don't remember the plot very well, we don't even really see the guy for most of it. So like when it comes to the ending, like we're trying to save him from something, if I remember, or he's like not available. I don't remember, but like he just wasn't around, so I never grew to care about him whatsoever. Yeah, it was just another one where I was just like, you know, so it was very quick. I think I read it in like 2 hours. Unfortunately, just a no from me. Cinder and Glass. And then I was thinking maybe it's just a genre issue. I have to get away from romance and fantasy. So I turned to sci-fi. This is Upgrade. I got it from Book of the Month for July. This is a book about genetics and bioengineering. We know that something went horribly wrong. There was some kind of horrific accident that caused, I think they call it like the Great Starvation. It was essentially like a horrific worldwide famine where millions of people died. And after that, really strict laws came into play about doing any kind of genetic experiments. And so our main character is actually a member of not the FBI, but like whatever branch of the government goes around chasing the people who are still doing these like genetic things. There is an accident and he actually gets infected by one of these experiments, and we see things happen to him. There are quite a few twists. I thought that the idea was really interesting. It talks about some problems that the world is having right now. Like, what do we do about climate change? What do we do about like all of these things that everything is so out of our control? How can we as scientists fix this? I don't know. I thought the questions that it brought up were really interesting. I just thought kind of after we realized everything that was happening and then it becomes just like, how do we fix this problem? I felt like that was kind of where I lost interest. It left me feeling quite like melancholy for the rest of the day. But yeah, if you're looking for kind of like a sci-fi thriller, I did think that the first third of the book was quite good, and you might like the like action part. I was just a little but yeah, Upgrade was not bad considering how bad the previous books had been. This book was a little light at the end of the tunnel, so thank you, Upgrade. But for some reason I felt like after that book and after the previous books I just needed something to pick me up, and I decided to reread The Love Hypothesis. It was just sitting staring at me on my shelf. It wasn't even on my shelf, actually, it was on my floor. I decided to reread it because this was the first romance I ever read, and it knocked my socks off. I thought it was so funny. And now that I've read more romances, I realize that this is kind of, I wouldn't say weak, but like it's definitely like more on the fan fiction side. But you know what? It's still funny. Like I still laughed out loud. I still thought it was a good time. So yeah, I reread this just as like a palate cleanser. And so I felt ready to continue on my reading journey. So of course, then I read a horrifically sad book. This is The Hen Who Dreamed She Could Fly. I'm working on a video about translated work by Korean authors, and I asked my husband, who's Korean if you don't know, what some of his favorite books are that have been translated, and he mentioned this one, and he told me that it would make me cry, and so I was like, I'm in. It's a very short book. How long even? It's 120 something pages. It's just about like motherhood, like the love of a mother and the strength of a mother. It's about a hen who is a like egg laying hen. Like her eggs, they become eggs that are eaten, not chicks, and all she ever wants is a chick, and she wants to escape the chicken coop and live in the like yard. And it's all about how she ends up getting out of the yard. And it just goes through her life. It's very sad, like just all, yeah, and they're all animals. If I haven't read a book like that in a really long time where it's like the animals are the only characters. But yeah, if you want just like a quick read that's like quite sad, honestly, The Hen Who Dreamed She Could Fly. Next up, I finally read Fire, which is the sequel to Graceling in the Graceling series. And as promised by you guys, yeah, it isn't connected pretty much at all to Graceling, so you can almost read these as standalones. I think I really enjoyed Graceling, and so I kind of put off reading Fire simply so I could have it in moments like these where I'm having a kind of crappy reading month. And I picked it up and I was confused because it is so different from Graceling. Graceling takes place in a kingdom world where children will get graces and they will have some kind of power. It's a mixed bag, any kind of power. And then they are kind of taken, carted off, and given to the kings and queens to use in their like royal army or whatever. I was expecting it to be like that, but actually what happens is in Fire, it takes place in a totally separate world, actually. So they bring up the idea of graces. There is one Graceling, I will say. We meet him in the first chapter, so it's not a spoiler. But they bring up the idea of graces and they're like, oh, that's fairy tale stuff, ha, you know? So it's very different. What Fire is about is actually, instead of Gracelings, there are monsters, and that was kind of hard to get into, I'm not gonna lie. Something about either the way it was explained or just like the wording of it being like a monster, I didn't super love it. But basically there are monsters and they all have the ability to like control your minds, but there's like kitten monsters, and those kittens will just like convince you to love them until they bite you. And then there's like freaking pterodactyl monster. Like it was just, I didn't really understand what was going on. But our main girl, Fire, is a monster, and so she has mind control abilities. There is something funky going on in her world where all of the kingdoms are starting to be at war with each other, and so in the kingdom that she lives in, her powers are found out and she is brought to the capital to basically like interrogate the soldiers that they have found from other kingdoms. And she really doesn't like using her powers, so this is a really difficult thing for her. And then of course war does break out and story goes on from there. I ended up liking the characters. I really did. But there were just parts of it that were weird. So the monster part was weird. There are like many pregnancies and I was not expecting that. It's also like Fire, because she's a monster, she can't have children, and so that's also a part of the plot, is talking about like her infertility and stuff. I don't know. I liked the story, just the simple plot, the whole background of like there is a war and she has to help spy even though she doesn't necessarily like the king, blah blah blah. Like that's okay. But then there were just these details stacked on of like infertility, pregnancies, a kind of a love triangle, monsters. Then there's like that Graceling person who randomly shows up. Like there was so much going on that I felt like I just wanted to kind of clear the plot a little bit and just be like, just take something out. If I were to compare Graceling and Fire, Graceling wins hands down. Will I continue it? Yeah, because I heard that the next one it's back in the Graceling world and it follows, what's her name? Bluebell. One of the characters who was in Graceling. So I will still continue it. I still do like the author's writing. There were just things in there that I just wasn't interested in reading. So that was Fire. And after that, speaking about pregnancies, I read Nettle and Bone. Oh my god, this book was just another strange one. I almost felt like I had lost my ability to read. Like when I read Fire, I was so confused as to why I didn't like parts of it. And then I read Nettle and Bone and I just could not get into it. And I was like, can I like not read anymore? Do I have to change the name of my YouTube channel? Like I started reading Nettle and Bone right after I had gotten horrifically lost hiking in a mountain and I think I was dehydrated. And so I read the first chapter and my brain was just not working at the speed it usually does. So that could be part of it. But the story starts kind of in the middle. And then we flash back. And then we flash forward. Just the beginning was quite clunky. Once the actual story started in a more chronological way, I was along for the ride. But settling into it was quite difficult. It's about a girl who is a princess. She is the youngest of 3 daughters. One day, the prince from another kingdom demands that he marry the first daughter, and so he does, and then she dies. Then he marries the second daughter, and something just doesn't feel right again. Like she's kind of sick and they never hear from her and blah blah blah. The youngest daughter, in order to keep her safe, they send her to a convent and she is raised kind of as a nun, like a nun in training. When she decides that she needs to figure out what the hell is wrong with this kingdom, she knows that the kingdom is cursed, but she doesn't get we have to figure out what the curse is, figure out how to break it. She ends up having to go find a witch to help her do all of this stuff, and then she goes on this whole adventure. And I'm not explaining it well. The actual story was not my favorite because, again, I just couldn't get into it, the clunkiness of the beginning. But I ended up liking mainly, what were they called? The Dustwife and the Godmother, like, saved the book. I didn't necessarily like the main character. I did not like the random soldier man that they picked up along the way. I didn't get that dynamic at all. Literally, I only loved the Dustwife and the Godmother. Everyone else, I just didn't feel any connection to the characters. And again, it was just all about like pregnancies and having babies and stuff. I mean, that wasn't all about it, but I feel like I just kind of fixated on that because I had just read another book that was so obsessed with pregnancy. But yeah, so Nettle and Bone, let me know, because I've heard so many people love it and I literally felt like I was just reading it wrong. And so let me know your thoughts about it in the comments because I'm feeling very insecure. So that was Nettle and Bone. I'm sorry, I wish I had like better books to talk about. This was just like a meh month. Ugh. So yeah, Nettle and Bone. Next up, I read an entire series, if you follow me on my books, and I ended up getting really sick because of it, because I looked at my screen too long. I finally read the Awakens series. Yeah, you guys have been on me about it. I didn't realize this at the time, but this is written by the same author as Deal with an Elf King. So there are 5 books, and like I said, I read the first 3 back to back to back, and I ate it up, and then the last 2 books were bad. I almost didn't want to read them, but I can't leave a story unfinished. So The Heir Awakens takes place in a kingdom where there are normal people, and then there are people who have certain powers, and they're tied to different elements like fire people, water, you know, you get it. But people who have the air element were like low-key hunted down. There was like a genocide basically, and they don't exist anymore. Or do they? And we follow our main girl who works in a library. That's all she wants to do. She loves books. She reads all the time. She knows everything. One day she's at the library where she hears a commotion out at the front gates of the capital city, right? So she looks out the window and she sees that these soldiers are coming in because the kingdom is in the middle of a war. They're riding in. It doesn't look, they're not like victorious. The only reason why soldiers come back is for either victory or defeat. But it's just a small group of soldiers, and at the middle is a prince, and he is wounded, not looking good. And so all of a sudden, these people rush into the library, and they're like, we need every piece of information you have on poisons about this one area. Get all of your librarians into the research room, and then just like send us anything you've got. Our main girl had just met, there are two princes. She had just met the very handsome, charismatic prince. He came to visit the library and she fell off of a ladder and he caught her, and like ever since then she's been completely in love. She's like, we're gonna save this prince. I'm gonna do it. And so she researches like crazy. She's sending all these notes to the palace physicians to try and save this prince. This action ends up wrapping her into something she has never wanted to be a part of. She never wants to leave the library. And she gets wrapped up in this war. Okay, and I don't want to give too much away, but I thought that the first 3 books, kind of similar to Deal with an Elf King, you knew what parts everybody was playing. You knew how certain threads of the story were going to end. The tropes were just like there for you to see. Sometimes I like them to be hidden, but in this case it was like, I'm gonna take anything at this point. I just want a good fantasy to read. So I thought that the world was interesting. I thought that the powers were interesting. I thought that the political dynamics were quite interesting. And then we got to the 3rd book and it was just everything I was interested in was kind of tied up nicely. Not nicely, but like I could figure it out by myself. And the last 2 books were just kind of focused on battle, but the battle, like what they were fighting for, I didn't even really care. It was just so upsetting because I ate up the first 3. So I would recommend it if you're looking for a fantasy series that you haven't read before. You might like the last 2 books, but I felt like it was just kind of spread out so it could be 5 books when it really could have been like 3.5, you know? But thank you for those who recommended it to me, because that one day I spent reading the first 3, even though it ended up making me sick, was very fun. So yeah, definitely. I thought that the romance was nice. I can't say anything without spoiling it, but that is The Heir Awakens. That kind of took over my life for a solid 3 days, so great. After that, the library gods smiled upon me because I'm glad my mom died. Like, the physical books are sold out everywhere. If you have Overdrive, you can request that your library purchase books if they haven't already, and if they do end up buying it, you will be first on the holds list. And so I heard about this book way before it came out, and so I requested that my library buy it, and so on release day I got it, which is like, whew. That's also how I currently have Babel waiting for me. So anyway, if you haven't heard about it, I'm Glad My Mom Died is a memoir, and I never watched iCarly. I think right before that was when I kind of like stopped my Disney Nickelodeon era, and so I never knew who Jennette was. I have no experience with her whatsoever. So I went into this just knowing that it was kind of about childhood stardom. I wrote this when I posted about it on my Instagram, but like it was like watching a car crash. I couldn't look away. I think I read it in like 1.5 sitting. So it's written in first person, very kind of almost stream of consciousness, it felt like. And I thought that it was written that way because we start early. She starts the story when she's like 6 years old, I think. And so I thought like, oh, she's just writing from kind of the perspective of a 6-year-old. And that's why her thoughts are kind of racing and she's so anxious and stuff. And then it just continued and she got older and her voice sounded the same. And I kind of realized like, oh, this is like how she thinks. Like this is how her memories sound to her. It just made it that much more apparent of like she was forced to stay immature and little. Like physically, her mom and herself eventually like didn't want her to mature so that she could continue playing these like child roles, and she was so sheltered, like she could only work, like that's all she could do. And so the way that she wrote really reflected that. Like it was a point where she was like 18, 19 and she's talking about like going to a party and hooking up with a guy. The way she was talking about it was just, it felt so immature. It felt like I would have believed her if she was saying that she was like 14. It was just so hard to read and watch. Of like, she was just like stuck in so many ways, physically, in her career, emotional. Like it was just really hard. I just overall thought it was really great. Like she touched on so many different things. It was just so easy to read. Like I said, it almost felt kind of childlike, her voice. It was just so matter of fact. So very easy to read. Definitely like very hard topics. A lot of sexual assault, eating disorder, self-harm. Not the lightest of topics, but I thought it was really wonderful. So yeah, that is, I'm happy, I'm glad my mom died. And so sort of like when I read Fire and then Nettle and Bone, and it was like just a lot of books about pregnancy, then I went into this phase of reading about eating disorders. So I'm glad my mom died. As I told you, trigger warning, like heavily talks about in detail her eating disorder. And then I started reading Juniper and Thorne. This was such a dark and twisted tale. I did not know anything going into it, and it was just not what I thought it was gonna be. It is a story about 3 sisters. Their father is a warlock wizard guy, and he keeps them in the house separated from everything until one day they sneak out and kind of get a taste of the outside world, and then everything falls to pieces from there. There is a curse. There is a beautiful ballerino. Is that what you call a male ballerina? A beautiful boy who does ballet. But it is so dark. The imagery, I think it was just jarring to read because in the beginning, our main character acts like a little kid. She's so naive. She's never read a book in her life. She only reads from her father's codex, which is like his collection of fairy tales and recipes and spells. She's so gullible and she's so just doesn't know how the world works. And then all of a sudden it comes out that she's 23 years old. And then once we learn her age, it gets quite sexual. She talks about these like sexual fantasies that she has, and it's all really dark. Like the amount of times that nipple is used in this book, but it was like really dark. Like everything was bloody, and like if it was sexual, it was also like she was cutting off body parts, and like that turned her on and stuff. And then like once there is a steamy scene, it's a lot of like broken glass and blood, and it was one of those where like sex is paired with violence, but like the violence makes it romantic. It does though. Like I understand why it's like that, because it also ties into, there's a lot of talk, not only like eating disorders, but it also talks a lot about sexual assault of children, so be aware of that. More than one of the characters have had really dark experiences with people that they trusted. I just wasn't expecting it at all. There's also like bestiality in it. Like it was just distracting. Like the actual plot of like unraveling the mystery, there's a curse and whatever, that took a back seat to like all this other stuff that was happening, and I couldn't focus on the actual curse part of it. It was like a ride that I didn't want to go on. And then I just couldn't wrap my head around the fact that like this 23-year-old was acting like she was 12, but then there would be these very gruesome kind of sexual fantasy scenes. There weren't like steamy scenes. It was just like happening in her brain. Having that go on and then having her like in real life acting like she's this little girl who doesn't know anything. It was just, I really didn't love it. I liked the aspect of it that it felt like a very old, dark fairy tale, but it was just a little too much for me, a little too much darkness. Maybe it was because I had just read that memoir. It put me in like a really weird headspace, and I would just warn you that like it was so heavy for something that I didn't expect to be heavy at all. Every trigger warning that there could be, Juniper and Thorne. After that, I read the Caraval trilogy because I'm doing a reread. I'll talk about that later. If you want to know about Caraval, I've talked about it many times. But after that, I read Love on the Brain, and thank God. Caraval helped me get over Juniper and Thorne and the memoir, but I needed something that was like fluff. And so Love on the Brain is Ali Hazelwood's next book after The Love Hypothesis. Is Love on the Brain a carbon copy of The Love Hypothesis? Yes. To the point where I actually took pictures. Oh, on page 16, our main character is named B, and our main male character is named Levi. And on page 16, she describes Levi as alpha. And I wanted to put the book down. But other than that, it was literally The Love Hypothesis. It was exactly the same. If she had given The Love Hypothesis way more smut. People have many feelings about the sex scene in The Love Hypothesis, and it's worse. In Love on the Brain, it's bad, man. It's unsexy. Like, I was getting secondhand embarrassment from reading it, honestly. Full disclaimer, the smut's heavy in there, and it's not my cup of tea. So more specifically than it just being The Love Hypothesis Part 2, it follows a girl who is a neuroscientist who has been put on the head of a research team at NASA where they're going to be making some kind of new equipment for astronauts, and she's so excited. She packs up her bags, heads to Houston, when she realizes that her co-leader on this project is a guy named Levi Ward, who she went to grad school with, and he fucking hates her. We get flashbacks, but like, he would never talk to her. He would always be like, I can't work on projects with her. It was a thing that people talked about at school. Like, it was a joke how much Levi hates B. Obviously, we know that's not true. We know it's a misunderstanding. But B, kind of like Olive, I think she's more than Olive, talks so fast, interrupts people before they are allowed to explain themselves. She's like, no, I understand. Shh, don't tell it anymore. I'll leave. So the first quarter of the book was quite frustrating just because you knew it was a misunderstanding and you knew that B just wasn't listening. And then the smut started. So what did I like about this book? I don't know, but I did like it. Like, it just kind of felt like I was rereading The Love Hypothesis. You knew it was stupid. If you turned off your brain, it was fine. It was just kind of like a thing that I wanted. Like, if you go into it knowing that it is miscommunication trope, enemies to lovers, and all of the twists are exactly the same as The Love Hypothesis, like the beats of the story are exactly the same. If you're prepared for that, it's a fine book. It does the job. There were definitely parts, similar to The Love Hypothesis, where I laughed out loud. So it's not like a waste of a book, but it was definitely, I felt like I was getting deja vu the whole time. Yeah, Levi and what's his name? Adam. Same person. A mountain of a man. He likes to run. Literally, they're the same. They're the same. There were literal lines that were the same. Like, he wouldn't let her walk home because there weren't any sidewalks. And that was like mentioned multiple times in this book. So that was Love on the Brain. Last but not least, I said that I reread Caraval. I also read Once Upon a Broken Heart, so that I can start Ballad of Never After. This is coming out in September, but Susan was nice enough to send me an advanced copy. I'm only third of the way through. I'm going to be making a separate video about kind of my most anticipated releases of 2022 because they're all coming out right now. So I'll talk more about that later. So things are looking up. The beginning of this month, the middle of this month, Strange to the Dreamer was great. The middle of this month was rough. Yeah, I had like the fluff of Love on the Brain. And people, I'm seeing the conversation of Levi versus Adam, and I gotta say, I much prefer Adam. Do I? I don't know, because the thing with Levi is even though I knew it was a miscommunication, and maybe it's just because I've had horrible experiences with office sabotage, reading all of this stuff going wrong with her work and him maybe being behind it, or like at the very least not helping, made me feel really anxious, and I didn't know how we were gonna come back from that because I knew it was a miscommunication. That really stressed me out. So I don't know. There were like weird vibes from Levi the whole time. Levi gave me weird vibes. So I'm Team Adam. Yeah, I can say that with confidence. I'm still Team Adam. So let me know your thoughts, Levi or Adam, down below. That was August. I read so much, but I enjoyed so little. Oh, my camera's gonna die. No, I'm not changing my battery. So I'm gonna let you go. Thank you again to Native. You can check my link in the description box. You can use my code CariCanRead to get 33% off of your order of 3 plastic-free deodorants. And I will see you guys next time. I have a lot planned. I'm excited. Things are looking up in terms of reading good things. So many good books are coming out. If you have the Arc of Blood marked, send it to me because I'm dying and I can't wait until November. But other than that, I'm fine. I love you guys. I will see you guys next time. Sorry that my battery's dying, but great to chat with you and see you later. Bye.